Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great honor and pleasure to be here today in Karlsruhe, because this place has actually a very special place in my heart. When I started my nuclear odyssey after finishing my master thesis in Helsinki University, I got a scholarship and was working there in Transuranium Institute for quite some time. And since then I have often come there and have a lot of friends there. But what was also interesting on that time when I landed here, it was actually this time of the year. And instead of concentrating on the finest parts of the plutonium chemistry, we spent a lot of time in Fasching parties, and this was something very, very nice for a Scandinavian, because we don't have those things up there in the north. But let's be now a little bit more serious and go on this nuclear issue. Actually, when I got the invitation and I saw this logo, I thought that, wow, what should I talk? And what kind of proposal I should come? But now I realized, and after I put this whole thing together, that the answer is in this logo. And I will tell you at the end of the speech what needs to be taken from there. Well, we heard the drawbacks and setbacks of the nuclear energy by Ivan in a very, very good and serious way. But nevertheless, many countries see that nuclear energy is an important part of their electricity mix, and they are not going to give it away. There are currently 450 nuclear power plants in the world. World Association of Nuclear Operators believe that 2030, 20 years from now, the number will be 550. And this includes already the corrections from Fukushima, the first ones. And if we look this growth, actually, it's not all over the world. There are certain places where this growth comes, and it's mainly in Asia. The booming economies and a growing population, industrialization requires more electricity in India and China. They are the ones where growth is. And then I have also to mention the third country is actually Russia, which builds, but most of them are on the, I think, on the European side. But there is a new feature coming in this development. There will be also a lot of countries who have very little nuclear experience. They don't even have universities with the nuclear energy departments, but they have decided to build nuclear energy and rely to nuclear energy. Their legislation may be not yet sufficiently good for that, so there are a number of challenges out there. Examples of such countries are United Arab Emirates, Jordan, and Vietnam, who have very little of this experience. And according to the IAEA information, 40 countries are currently looking nuclear options still, but only 1 dozen of them have actually firm plans. And many of them are also developing countries, so they have to, whoever builds those nuclear power plants, operates them, have to fight for the resources, have to fight for the support, human support and money. And for that purpose, the IAEA launched, at the time of El Paradise about 10 years ago, a very special program where the IAEA tries to help the developing countries who embarked on this route. Well, then I talk a little bit about nuclear safety, certainly Fukushima, then nuclear security, which I hope that there will be no terrorist attack, and a little bit then on nuclear non-proliferation, nuclear weapons and lessons learned from Iran and Syria and perhaps North Korea. I actually call this three, safety, security and safeguards, to unseparated triplets, because there's a lot of synergism there. So if, for example, if I lock very well nuclear material in a secure safe, at the same time, I solve some of my safety problems. If I have a good accountancy on nuclear material, which is essential for safeguards verification, from the safety purposes, I know all the time where this material is in the facility. So there's a lot of synergism. But if you look today, the nuclear industry and the nuclear installations, all those three are actually under different legislation, sometimes even different regulatory bodies. And in the institutes themselves, very often different people are in charge of safety and security versus safeguards. And we need to bring this together, and I think that this Fukushima has shown certain reasons for that. And then the main lesson, I think, from Fukushima is that the international community has really to strengthen these safety, security, and non-proliferation regimes. This is everyone's matter. It's not only individual state who is in charge. Sure, responsibility has to be in the state, but it has to be a transparent system, and it has to be somehow audited to make sure that everyone applies adequate standards. And for that one, we need to develop additional international mechanisms. Then Fukushima itself. Actually, I have also a memory there because I spent one of my birthdays there. It was a round number. I was there alone, inspector. And why I also remember that at that night, a typhoon passed over Fukushima. It was the first typhoon which I ever lived in Japan. And since then, I moved to Japan, so I saw quite a few of them. And then as additional flavor, I got also earthquakes. So I'm not so worried about them. First of all, as I said, much better safety standards are needed. And reactors and nuclear installations need to learn from this lesson with a new design so that they can survive several days without electricity and services. We need also to look where the spent fuel is stored. Up to now, it was easy, put it to a spent fuel pond, pool, water, it's easy to maintain, cool, etc. But this showed the vulnerability, and I think that the rest of the world has now to follow Germany. Just put them in these famous Castor casks, put them on a dry storage and keep there until you can do something with them. It also showed that when you go to look the legislation and these arrangements, that actually international community needs also to take additional steps with regard to nuclear security. I'm sad to tell, but actually the security legislation and security procedures are worse than the ones for nuclear safety. The industry has been focusing in the past pretty much on the safety and less to the security. And we have from this nuclear black market network, we have also found that there has been attempts by terrorists to acquire nuclear materials. They have tried to acquire nuclear technology. They have tried to acquire the most sensitive nuclear technology, which is nuclear weapon design, purposely for the purpose and for the terrorism. Luckily, this didn't succeed. But today, when we have the first terrorist act, it doesn't need to be a big. But the fact that the radioactivity gets dispersed in a subway station in London or in Calcutta or wherever, it will have impact which goes well beyond the borders of those countries, and it will be everyone's matter. And therefore, we need to reduce this risk, and we need to learn then the next lesson from Fukushima, and this is to do with the emergency response. Today, one country is not alone there. When this kind of events happen, they have an impact to everyone. As Ivan said, radioactivity came from Chernobyl, flew over Poland, landed in Finland and Sweden. They were the first ones to observe it. But then there were areas in between where there was no fallout at all. So we need to prepare some kind of system when an accident gets. There is support for the country of concern, that they have all the resources available to mitigate the consequences. And when these accidents take place, one of the lessons from Fukushima is that they probably never really had a training where all these parties got together and saw and run a kind of actual accident exercise, because only with this way you learn to communicate with each other, plus you see whether there is a gaps in your safety and emergency system. And all this has to be done under the public eye. This has been missing. For example, IAEA provides services on nuclear safety missions and peer reviews and go to review how certain reactors are following the conventions and practices which they have agreed to. There has been no such mission from IAEA until last year to India. They never asked, and IAEA kind of push. There were very few such missions to Japan, only in the last few years. 10 years ago, I don't think anyone had been there. Most of these missions have been here in Europe, Eastern Europe, because we Europeans are a little bit having bleeding hearts, and we make sure that these new states which came as a result of collapse of Soviet Union get proper nuclear industry. Then few words about Iran, Syria, and non-proliferation. How much I have? Okay, 4 minutes, it's enough. So we have these 3 proliferation cases on the table: North Korea, Iran, and Syria. What we can learn? First of all, North Korea is a very unfortunate case for the whole non-proliferation regime, because we got first time a country which is part of the regime, gets the benefits of peaceful use of nuclear energy, and then decides to quit the NPT and takes all the benefits with him or with them. This will erode the proliferation regime. This is a new way of diverting peaceful nuclear energy for military uses. Iran, I had to cut it a little bit short. So I say only a couple of remarks about the Iranian uranium enrichment program and why the people are worried about it. First of all, they are worried for 2 reasons. One reason is that there is very little need at this point of time for uranium enrichment in Iran. They can wait. The second reason is these military-related studies which IAEA has investigated, and you have seen it in the news last November when IAEA put out a report painting the full picture, what they think they see. Once you have uranium enrichment and once you have this kind of studies, you are in much better position, if you decide so, to manufacture a nuclear weapon. Why Iran doesn't need uranium enrichment at this point of time until it has answered all these questions is very simple. As a Cold War legacy in Russia, there is 100 tons of highly enriched uranium there, ready for sale. This can be used for Tehran research reactor. It needs about 100 kilos out of this 100 tons. So material is available, and therefore I think that it would be appropriate for Iran to come with a clean table, clean the past, and convince the international community that the purpose is solely for peaceful purposes in the nuclear program. Syria is a little bit similar case, which have deceived the international community for several years, have left unanswered questions: where does these uranium particles come? Are there some other facilities which we are not told? Since you build a reactor, you need a fuel. So fuel must come from somewhere, and in particular, if you are ready to start the reactor in 1 year's time, the fuel should be already practically in the warehouse. So, to end up then with a little bit more positive note. First of all, we cannot uninvent plutonium separation. We cannot uninvent uranium enrichment. We cannot uninvent nuclear weapon manufacturing. Know-how is there. It's not possible to put the genie back to the bottle. So what we have left international cooperation, additional legal instruments. Non-proliferation regime needs to be revitalized. And if we don't tackle them at this stage properly, I mentioned this erosion. So at the very end, the regime, in a worst case, will be collapsing, because only the good guys are being investigated and the bad guys get away. I think there is still a hope if we do it, and now I tell how to do it from these centers. So, alles, instead of in, we say im. We take the brackets away, and there is already blue color, which is United Nations, and Ordnung, and remove the question mark. Thank you.